Hello and welcome to North Country Matters. My name is Donna Seymour. I'm a member of the St. Lawrence County branch of the American Association of University Women, one of the civic partners for this show. Today we are hosting a candidate conversation with Addie J. Russell, the incumbent candidate for the 116th Assembly District. Joining us in conversation is Leanne Hunt, Professor Emeritus of History at St. Lawrence University and a member of the League of Women Voters of St. Lawrence County. Addie, welcome to Conversations with Candidates. You've been here before. You are running for your seat in the Assembly, and we have prepared a few questions for you, issues that the North Country voters care about and are things that the Assembly and the legislature have been working on for the last couple of years. Recent district telephone surveys have included questions on education, the SAFE Act, and women's issues. So we thought we'd start by taking a look at those issues. Public opinion remains strong in support for raising academic standards, although the implementation and the rollout of Common Core got low marks last year, both from educators and from the public. Now we're in year two and things seem to be smoothing out and rolling a little bit better. So the question is, do you still support the Common Core standards? And if so, how can the legislature assist the schools to make the transition go smoother to higher standards?
Well, I don't think anybody disagrees that the implementation of the Common Core was a disaster. It was rushed through. And you know, I guess the vendor that the state education department selected really did not do the job that I think they should have done. I don't think anybody is opposed to higher standards. Over the last several years, I think it's pretty much acknowledged that New York State kind of gradually let its standards slip. And we really weren't doing any of our students any justice by doing that. So I support higher standards, but I'm just appalled at the lack of professionalism and the kind of writing it and making it up as they went, that the group that provided the curriculum, that's the approach that they took. So, you know, our teachers are actually the ones that are salvaging this effort to increase our standards. Now that the curriculum has all been written and provided to teachers, something that should have been done before really testing was created to test this material. Now that our teachers have had this curriculum and they can take a look at it and make sense out of it, the second year is going to be much better.
Excuse me, are you saying that this original curriculum was imposed without consultation with the teachers themselves?
That's correct.
I mean,
there was a small amount.
People to put it together.
There was a small amount of discussion, before it went into effect.
But they weren't central to the process. It didn't emanate from the teaching profession.
Correct, and they were also given the curriculum mere days before they were told to teach it. And there was no really broad set of goals that were presented for the entire school year. So it really did not allow our teachers to even make adjustments.
How did this happen? Who are these private vendors and why were they inserted into the process?
I believe it was Pearson, and they were who was selected. And that was a decision that was made by the Department of Education, and as well as putting the tests into play very early. In the Assembly, we tried to adjust this midstream, but we passed legislation in early March. It took till another several weeks on the eve of the standardized tests to even come to an agreement that the tests wouldn't count.
It's obvious, it's preposterous to try to introduce a reform of this magnitude without the active participation and ownership, of the people who have to implement it.
Right, and that was the biggest mistake. So one of the things that we can do moving forward is protect our children from the effects of implementation, on the fly, which we have done, and provide our teachers with the resources that they need to really be able to teach our kids to the standards that we're expecting them to do. So, I'm a mother of now a kindergartner and a first grader, and I'm lucky that, my kids were just starting out in this new curriculum because, the first, second, third, fourth, fifth grade parents, it was a nightmare last year, and I got a little taste of it. I didn't know how to teach my son math, and I was teaching him things that at a time when I thought was appropriate, but that wasn't what they were doing in school. And so I kind of said to the teacher, I'm just going to be a little hands off because I don't want to mess it up at home. And but this year, I've spoken to elementary school teachers. They feel that they now are able to take a lot more control over the curriculum, and they'll do the best that they can. So this is an evolving issue that I'm going to continue to stay in contact with my educators to see if we need to do more to help our students and our teachers increase the standards and make adjustments to the Common Core as they deem appropriate.
Okay. Let's follow up for a second about public education financing and funding, because we know that while we've been trying to implement this new curriculum, we've also been trying to do it without much in the way of the resources. The governor's flat 2% tax cap and the out of whack funding formulas. Literally, we have districts who can get money to renovate and expand in the face of lowering school censuses, and yet they don't have enough money to hire the teachers to actually teach courses in the high school. So one of the things that we know that's coming down the pike is that there's going to be some more money next year in the budget because of all these savings. And so the question is, are any of those substantial budgetary savings actually going to get turned around into public school financing next year, or will that money go somewhere else? What do you think?
Well, I believe that money needs to go into our schools. That is one of the areas that, as you know, I've been working on for many years. The problem is that this money is essentially a one-time infusion, but at this point, our schools, some of our schools are in such dire straits that we need to get that money into them to try to keep a basic level of education in many of our school districts. We have been pushing to get rid of the gap elimination adjustment. I have partnered with school districts and with organizations that work across this state. We haven't, been able to convince all of the players in the budget process that that's what we have to do. But, schools here in St. Lawrence County, Canton and Potsdam, are a perfect example of how traumatic the gap elimination adjustment has been in our schools.
Could you explain why? Not everybody.
Well, because they're not the poorest schools and they're not the richest schools, so they don't have a strong enough tax base to be able to make up that cut. But they're not poor enough to be getting restoration as quickly as other schools, and so they have been suffering under it. And the magnitude of their cut is not. Is significantly more than other school districts in the surrounding areas. So it is something that we have to take care of this year. And even though it's a one-time infusion that we might be able to put into education, we ought to be able to start planning strategically long term to right this ship overall.
Right.
I want to shift the topic a bit, and it's not quite as much of a jump cut as it may seem, because I'd like to talk about the SAFE Act. And obviously one of the impetuses behind that act were the horrific stories of school shootings and so forth. I have the kind of instinctive attitude toward gun control that most academics have. I'm not a hunter. I don't get obsessed about gun rights. But what I have noticed, and which sort of surprised me, was the proliferation of Repeal the SAFE Act signs all over the North Country. And I had occasion, getting my lawnmower fixed, to talking to a guy in the store who did not strike me as any kind of fanatic, or right-wing loony, but who was deeply upset about it. He said, look, he hunts, right? And this was going to make it hard for him to get 22 shells. Now, and I figured that, well, if someone as basically sensible and as good a citizen as that is this upset, then I'd like to know why. I mean, is it a problem of presentation, misunderstanding, or was the thing rolled out in a kind of insensitive way? I know it's an issue in your campaign, so I'd like to know your position.
Well, you know, we'll probably hit on a theme today of, you know, have things been rolled out, you know, in a way that, you know, that our community likes. We've talked about the Common Core being implemented or being rolled out.
There's Obamacare too, I mean, on a
you know,
national scale.
badly, and I think that that is one of the reasons why there is such a dramatic outcry about the SAFE Act, because it is such an important issue, as is education, that, you know, our community, and they have a right to expect more dialogue on these types of issues. You know, I didn't even have the opportunity to make sure that, you know, the community knows that, you know, I'm a gun owner, that I hunt, I have a hunting license, I come from a sportsman background, and you know, because everything was, you know, pushed upon the legislature so quickly, there really wasn't that time for the normal discourse, and so now that's happening after the fact. And really, one of the big issues is with a constitutional issue with the Second Amendment. You know, we take those things very seriously. I take those things very seriously. I was presented with a piece of legislation to pass or to not pass. After what happened at Newtown, I mean, it wasn't just that. We have had shooting massacres for years and years and years across this country.
And accidental shootings, I mean, all kinds of stuff.
Well, passing the SAFE Act was the responsible thing to do. We have to set the tone that these types of senseless shootings are not appropriate. There are, you know, a piece of the legislation that increased the penalties, the charges for people that kill our first responders. That was a bill that I carried in the Assembly. There are enhanced penalties for other types of illegal gun activities. You know, we needed to do something.
But these can't be the provisions that have got ordinary North Country people upset, right? I mean, who would object to things like that?
Right, and so
just wondering where.
So a lot of the objection is process, and some of them, you know, have to do with the manner in which the other issues, I think, were dealt with. You know, I've sat down with representatives from gun clubs and from the you know, Second Amendment advocacy groups, and I've said, look, you know, I support the legislation. We had to be responsible and begin to address the gun violence in our country. But you also have the value of having me vote yes, but also understanding the North Country sportsman way of life. And you know, after the, you know, as the meeting was concluding, I said, look, I don't believe that this law is going to be repealed. You know, but I am here to listen to your concerns about the provisions and the impact and unintended consequences that are going on, and I am more than happy to talk about whether we should be making some changes. And I think that there are some aspects that we could change, and you know, they got back in touch with me and said, right now we are focusing on repeal, and we'd like to see how the lawsuits play out. And so I completely respect their strategy, but as a gun owner myself and someone who can see that maybe we can make adjustments, I do sit here willing to sit down and talk about amendments. But I think that those that are the most strongly opposed would rather wait until the court proceedings are done before they go down that route, and I respect, you know, that that's their decision.
The last thing that we've all been surveyed about are women's issues. This seems to be the year of women's issues, at least in terms of what candidates want to talk about, although it's been a little frustrating for those of us who've watched legislation not really get out of the legislature this last 2 years and actually make it to the governor's desk. So what are your priorities in this area? You know, you and I have talked before about the Women's Equality Act and many of the provisions. What's the prognosis for this coming year, do you think?
Well, I think that the prognosis is very good. You know, first of all, the opposition was essentially with leadership in the Senate not allowing the legislation to come to the floor even for an up or down vote. And so I expect that this year, we already know that the coalition government that was in place for the last 2 years is no longer in place, and that the the IDC, the Independent Democratic Caucus, is likely to caucus with the mainline Democrats who to create a majority. So I think that there's a much better chance that we will be able to make progress on women's issues. And I actually think that we will make more progress than what was proposed in the original 10-point plan. It was put together as a compromise piece of legislation. In the Assembly, we have been passing legislation in support of women's equality, against domestic violence, a host of measures. Pay equity, all sorts of discrimination. And I actually think that we'll have a better chance at passing meaningful legislation for women that really gets at these discriminatory practices and violence with a Democrat-led Senate. That is, I think, something that is absolutely in the cards. Many of the pieces of the women's equality agenda were just putting into state law existing federal law. And also, not knocking the women's equality agenda, but there are other things besides those 10 issues that really bear on the
Paid
focus.
family leave and childcare being a couple of them.
Exactly, looking at other issues that they're not, and the other thing is, it's not just women's issues. These are family issues. These are, is your wife, girlfriend, significant other, should she be actually bringing more home in her paycheck to support a household? And what type of stress does that put on a household when the woman is working, just as hard as, say, a male counterpart at her job, but bringing home less? I mean, we all know that financial issues are some of the most stressful on families and lead to them, being torn apart. And I guess anybody who cares about our families and them being strong should be caring about things like discrimination, and they should be fighting for women's equality. And that's I think that's the feeling here in the North Country, and that's one of the reasons that I work so hard.
Thank you.
Right. Let's turn to some of the New York State ballot items.
Okay.
And the first one, the one that's been getting probably the most attention, is the redistricting amendment.
Yes.
And as you, I'm sure, know, this is very controversial within the good government community. I mean, it's a remarkable division. The organization that I belong to is for it, League of Women Voters, but other organizations that I respect equally, Common Cause, NYPIRG, and so forth, are quite opposed to it. Now, these groups don't differ on the philosophy. It's the question, is it half a loaf, is it better than none, or whatever, or will it in fact defer real reform? And just recently, the state Supreme Court ruled in favor of, I believe, a Common Cause appeal, requiring that the word independent be taken out of the legislation on the grounds that, in the court's opinion, this would not be an independent, commission. So, what's your feeling about that? Is it something that is a step in the right direction, or is it is it a detour from the right course?
Well, first of all, I think the court ruling was spot on, to insinuate that a process that has political appointees on it is going to be independent and not political. Right. Is, I think the judge ruled correctly in that regard. Whenever there's a process that involves the selection of individuals to work on our behalf, you have to understand that the political process is going to be part of that. So it would be disingenuous to try to tell the public that we're setting up some sort of pristine, non-political entity, because first of all, anyone that's going to be at all interested in the position is going to have an interest in politics. Sure. Whether it's someone like you or
clergyman, it doesn't,
exactly. There's going to be you're going to come to the table.
And somebody has to make those decisions
with your own opinions. And so, will this process perhaps set up a different outcome? It's entirely possible, but there are always going to be political interests in play, and it's just, would you rather create another layer, of people that are involved in it, or I guess that's what the voters are going to decide, whether they think another layer of individuals provides enough insulation to get a better result, or should it stay in the hands of people that they have the ability to elect or not elect to the office.
Once upon a time, about 20 years ago, St. Lawrence County was represented by one assembly person instead of four like we have now, and we shared a state senator with Jefferson County, and then we've been sliced and diced so many ways between our two counties that it's ridiculous that St. Lawrence County has 7 representatives, because it's hard to get anybody to pay attention to the issues of the whole county when there are 7 people who are competing for a little slice of our attention.
We tend to be a fairly small component of their district too. So
Exactly.
Well, St. Lawrence County, the part that is in the district I represent, actually is, it's got more people than those that live in Jefferson County. And also of the 4 that represent St. Lawrence County, I have a much larger share. And
Right.
so I guess whether you think it's good or bad, I end up carrying a lot of the load even in the area that I don't represent
Right.
in terms of constituent work and economic development, just because I have a larger concentration. And, so...
And the interests of people
I like
don't
to
stop
say-
at a town border.
Right, and the impact of a business
Right.
doesn't stop at an arbitrary line on a map. And
That's right.
so where there has now a kind of become a void on the eastern side of St. Lawrence County, I still do feel the need to take up issues that impact the entire county, because I don't want to see those issues go without a champion.
But would it not make more sense, in a slightly more ideal world, to have a closer correspondence between representation at the state level and county government? Because there are decisions that get made by the county as a county. I mean, we're a diverse county in many respects, but politically we have certain common interests. And it would be a lot more convenient for local activists and organizers if there were one representative in Albany that we could go to.
I will
with
tell
those
you
concerns.
the one value of cross-county, which any way you look at it, there's going to be more
Sure.
than one, I think, representative. So, ideally, it would be, having 2.
Yeah, I was going to say 6 or 7.
Well,
Seems a bit
in the
excessive,
assembly
yeah.
anyway, 2 in the
Yeah,
assembly.
right.
But there is value in having cross-county
Yeah.
representation, because there can be a more regional approach.
Right.
We
Sure,
can link
sure,
up
sure.
what's going on in other, parts of the community. Thinking that way is, and I think it's been working in terms of economic development. I represent what we refer to as the River District, and so I'm able to work on issues up and down the St. Lawrence River. There are a lot of common themes there, a lot of common history. So those things
Right.
do work. To the extent that, the eastern side of the county has been sliced and diced, that is a little bit problematic. Whenever we want to, try to address something as members of the assembly, we can't. We have to, work on everybody's schedules and
Yeah,
can we get
exactly.
together.
Right.
But I guess, to the voters that, I represent the county seat as well, and really a lot of the population center in St. Lawrence County. And so I feel, though, it is my job to pay attention to what goes on in the county, what the county's needs are. And I think I've been doing that fairly effectively over the last several years.
Good. There's another initiative that is in front of the voters at the state level, and it's the Smart Schools initiative. It's a $2 billion fund that will facilitate the purchase and installation of a lot of different kinds of technology in schools, high-speed internet, laptops, do some rebuilding and refurbishing of classroom space, working to accommodate more pre-K space, and of course work on security for schools. From your understanding of this bond act, would North Country schools get a fair share of this money?
I can't guarantee that we would get a fair share of this money. A lot of the money for capital type expenses are reliant upon local matches, and probably our schools in the most need are going to have the most trouble coming up with their match. So, whenever something is put out there as kind of the silver bullet and the equalizer, that is not always necessarily the case. And, because our schools will have difficulty coming up with that money, I'm not sure that they will actually be able to take advantage of this pot of money.
This has been a problem with the food program too, the food supplement program, which you had to match in order to get the aid, which seems absolutely perverse. I mean, you're
Right.
handicapping precisely the people who need it most.
So, and I guess in terms of borrowing, there's going to have to be a very interesting balance for this bond to really be secure of long-term value. And so some of the things that we might need the most here in terms of the newest technology, tablets and computers, they do not have a really long, useful life.
Right.
And so I think a lot more of it's going to be skewed toward traditional bricks and mortar types of investments. And, there's only so much that our schools can actually do in those types of investments.
And that's probably not just true of the North Country, that's true of a lot of rural places in this state.
And poor areas,
and
even
porous,
our cities will have, I think will have difficulty. So.
I'd like to move from the concerns of our immediate region to talk about the planet in general. As you probably are aware, there was a very major demonstration on Sunday, which was very well attended by people from the North Country. We have a strong organization here, people very committed to this kind of issue. And one of the things that the North Country 350 Alliance, as it's called, has been doing is to ask any candidate for office that we can, get a hold of, four very straightforward questions, because this is an issue that really does affect everybody on the planet. And people in elected office, I think, should express their views. The first question is, do you accept the scientific consensus that global warming is a serious problem, and that it's largely, generated by human beings?
Yes. I believe that global warming exists and that we are contributing to it hastening. There may be natural cycles of heating that go on, but I think that our industrial age has significantly contributed to it.
And it's the one factor we can potentially control.
Right, and that is what is really driving the severe weather that we have. I think we've moved a little bit away from the discussion of global warming and a little bit toward the severity.
The term is now climate change because it embraces more than global warming.
Exactly. So I think that then in terms of that, the impacts of that were seen just as recently as last winter.
Certainly the insurance companies are believers in this because of all of the claims that have been made with storm after storm after storm.
And our economic security is really damaged, or at least our perception of our economic security is damaged. And that hurts our entire economy because we are constantly concerned about heating and not so much cooling this summer, but certainly heating, and then the cost of cleanup and what that does to a family's
Well, that gets us to the second question. That's the role of the fossil fuel industry. I mean, is it not the case that to address climate change significantly, we're going to have to reduce, if not eliminate, our dependence on oil and gas?
We're going to have
coal, certainly.
Yes, we're going to have to reduce or really invest in significant technology that cuts down on our greenhouse gas emissions. I really think we should be focusing a lot more on renewable sources of energy. I'm a huge supporter of solar technology. We're sitting here in Clarkson, and they're doing some fantastic research on things like that. I have voted against fracking. I've supported the bans on fracking in this state. I really have concerns about our freshwater resources in this state, which we have bountiful amounts of, and I don't want us to contaminate it by short-sighted drilling, especially when they're all around the country every week. They're coming out with new studies about how bad it is for the environment.
Good point about solar. I just read somewhere in the New York Times that the cost of solar energy has been reduced by 50% in the past 4 years, and it's still coming down.
And it's a very innovative area right now. There's cutting research and development that goes on all the time. It's kind of like computers and I guess microchips and things. Every year the technology gets better and it gets less expensive.
Carbon tax.
Yes.
How do you feel about that?
That's something that we need to really be moving in that direction. Really calculating the complete costs of what carbon emissions have on our
Yeah.
world is part of the equation that has been left out far too long.
Yeah, exactly. Economists talk about externalities, which include just about anything that really matters to human life on the planet. It's a strange kind of discipline that has to dismiss all these issues as kind of
Yeah.
external
It's
to the
like
to the
saying that
science.
food and energy don't belong in the inflation index
Yeah, yeah.
because, if we don't have them in there, we don't have inflation.
We don't have to worry
Right,
about it.
right,
Yeah.
so.
Well, okay, and the final, we touched on this. What other techniques, tactics would you support to deal with this problem?
Well,
Alternative energy.
well, there's alternative energy, but one of the biggest things that our community needs is things like weatherization. I'm talking about very practical solutions that we should be helping our residents here in the North Country. If we had tighter homes, if we had
Yep.
the right amount of insulation and windows, and we're able to convert to more efficient furnaces, that would go a long way to reducing our energy needs. And that's something that I work on to bring funding to this area, particularly to those that cannot afford to make those changes without assistance. The waiting lists are far too long, and there's also business opportunity. So, trying to support an environment where these types of businesses can thrive is also important.
Right.
So.
You mentioned earlier, Addie, about hydrofracking. There's kind of a related issue that is particularly a concern in parts of the North Country, and that's the oil trains.
Yes.
Which come down from Canada through Plattsburgh and end up in Albany. And those things have been described as rolling bomb trains and everything else. And there's been serious accidents, one just in Quebec over a year ago.
Right.
And so what's your thinking about that, and as infrastructure and as safety, two things related?
Well, first of all, I think we should try to not be reliant on those types of fuels. We should try to become as energy efficient as possible, and like I said, turn to renewable energy resources to the greatest extent that we can. One of the other concerns that I have is not just on trains, but them being on ships. By relying on this, we are constantly driving a demand for these bombs on wheels, and also for them to be in the St. Lawrence Seaway, which I do not want to see that happening. I've seen enough boats lose their steering while they're in the St. Lawrence Seaway. And if there was a spill, based on how what chemicals they add to this tar sands in order to move it, it would be like paving the bottom of the St. Lawrence River. And that would be
idea.
very bad idea. But one of the bright things, though, when we're talking about trains, is they are moving to change the type of car that is being
Get rid of
transported on.
those tank cars. Yeah.
Right, and then the other thing is technology that was developed right in Watertown at the air brake is going to be now out there for purchase. It's a new braking system that doesn't rely on like the engine being going, running and things like that.
So it's a
were
safety,
part of
it's a safety
yes,
system.
it's
Yeah.
part of what contributed to the accident in Quebec. They now have a product that should, make it so that never happens again. And, that's very exciting. And so when we talk about terms of being safer with these types of things, there are people right here in the North Country that are actually going to have jobs because we're working on those safety issues.
I hate to say this to both of you, but our time is up.
Okay.
We have come to the end of our time, and not the end of our questions, unfortunately. So thank you to you for coming in today. Thank you to our audience. And I'd like to remind you that you need to be registered to vote in order to vote in November, and that you should take the time to investigate what the candidates have to say and ask them questions about the issues that are of concern to you. So these conversations are a production of North Country Matters, which is produced here in the studios of WCKN on the campus of Clarkson University. This show is a civic collaboration between the St. Lawrence County branch of the American Association of University Women, the St. Lawrence County League of Women Voters, and the Communications and Media Department here at Clarkson University. Until next time, remember, our North Country matters. Thank you. Thank you, Addie.